The wagon wheels groaned against the narrow mountain path, each rotation grinding stone to dust beneath iron rims. Eliza Hart clutched her worn leather satchel tighter, the October wind cutting through her thin wool coat like accusations. Pine resin and frost filled her nostrils, sharp as the shame that had driven her from the valley below. "Reed's Hollow, just ahead," the driver muttered, his first words in 3 hours. He'd been paid to deliver her, not to offer comfort. The path curved, and through the thinning aspens, she saw it. Not the savage's den the townswomen had whispered about, but a sturdy log cabin with clean chinked walls and glass windows that caught the afternoon sun. Smoke rose straight from a stone chimney. Beyond the main house stood a smaller cabin, a stable, and what appeared to be rows of wooden boxes, beehives. She realized with surprise. The wagon stopped. Her legs trembled as she climbed down, boots crunching on frost-brittle grass. The driver tossed her single trunk onto the ground with unnecessary force, then left without farewell, eager to escape before nightfall trapped him on the mountain. The cabin door opened. Jonah Reed was not what she'd expected. Tall, yes, and broad-shouldered from mountain living, but his brown beard was neatly trimmed, his flannel shirt clean, his eyes gray as winter sky. Held neither cruelty nor hunger, only a quiet assessment that reminded her of how her father used to evaluate horses. "Mrs. Hart," he said, voice low but clear. He stepped down from the porch, movements deliberate but unthreatening. "I'm Jonah Reed. Welcome to Reed's Hollow." She stood frozen, waiting for the terms, the demands, the punishment to begin. Instead, he picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "You must be cold. Come inside." The cabin's interior stopped her at the threshold. Clean plank floors, a stone fireplace with a decent fire, furniture that showed skill rather than haste a table, chairs, even a bookshelf. The air smelled of wood smoke, beeswax, and something else, bread. Fresh bread cooling on the sideboard. "Your room is through here," he said, leading her past the main living area to a door on the east side. "It overlooks the creek." Her room, not his room, not their room, hers. The space was simple but complete: a bed with a thick quilt, a washstand with pitcher and basin, a small wardrobe, a chair by the window. On the bedside table sat a bar of lavender soap and a fresh towel, still smelling of sun and wind from drying. "I'll let you settle," Jonah said from the doorway. "Supper's at 6. Nothing fancy: venison stew and the bread you probably smelled. The privy's out back, but there's a chamber pot under the bed for nighttime. The creek's good for washing if you prefer it to the basin." She finally found her voice. "Mr. Reed. Jonah, if you're comfortable with it, we'll be sharing this mountain for a while." "I need to know what's expected." The words came out harder than intended. "The town council said I was to be that this was punishment for my—" She couldn't say it. Barrenness, failure, unwomanliness. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not pity, which would have destroyed her, but understanding. What the valley folk expect and what happens on this mountain are two different things. "Mrs. Hart, Eliza, if I may." She nodded, throat tight. "You're safe here. No one will touch your dignity. Not even me." He paused at the door. "Especially not me." After he left, she sat on the bed, springs creaking softly. Through the window, she could see the creek he'd mentioned, water running clear over smooth stones despite the season's cold. Her hands shook as she unpacked her few belongings: 2 dresses, undergarments, her mother's Bible, the medical texts she'd hidden in the satchel's false bottom. At 6, she emerged to find the table set for 2, tin plates and real silverware. The stew steamed in wooden bowls. Jonah pulled out her chair, a gesture so unexpected she almost retreated. "Please," he said simply. They ate in silence at first. The stew was good, better than she'd managed even before Thomas died. when she'd had a proper kitchen and hopes of children to fill it. The bread had a subtle sweetness she couldn't place. "Honey," Jonah said, noticing her expression. "From the hives. The bees do well here, away from people who'd rob them blind." "You keep bees?" It seemed impossible, this rough man tending something so delicate. "My mother did, back in Ohio. Brought the knowledge west after the war." He broke his bread carefully. "They're practical creatures, organized, honest about their intentions." "Unlike people." "Unlike people," he agreed. She helped clear the dishes, noting how he'd organized the kitchen herbs hanging from the rafters, preserves lined on shelves, everything within logical reach. He worked beside her without crowding, heating water for washing while she scraped plates. "I should explain," he said as they worked, "why I agreed to this arrangement." She stiffened but kept washing. "I've been alone here 6 years. By choice, mostly. The war left me, unfit for valley society. Too many nights waking up shooting at nothing. Too many times forgetting where I was. When I was—" He dried a plate slowly. "The mountains helped. The quiet. The bees. But winter's long, and talking to yourself stops being enough." "So you wanted a servant?" "I wanted a companion. Someone who needed the mountain as much as it might need them." He set the plate in its place. "The town council came to me with their proposition, a woman they'd condemned, available for the taking. They expected I'd accept their terms. But I wrote my own. They don't know that yet." A slight smile touched his mouth. "You're not here as punishment, Eliza. You're here as refuge, if you'll take it." That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the creek's constant murmur. Through the walls, she heard Jonah moving about, then settling. No footsteps approached her door. No handle turned. For the first time in months since the doctor's proclamation, since the town's judgment, since being marked as failed, she slept without fear. She woke to find frost on the window and sunlight streaming through. The house was quiet, but coffee smell drifted under her door. In the main room, she found a note on the table. "Checking trap lines. Coffee's hot. Breakfast in the warming oven. The chickens would appreciate feeding grains in the shed. J." Chickens. He hadn't mentioned chickens. She found them in a sturdy coop behind the cabin. 5 hens and a proud rooster who eyed her suspiciously. They clustered around her feet as she scattered grain, their gentle clucking oddly soothing. One brave hen pecked at her boot, and she almost smiled. Jonah returned at midday, a rabbit hanging from his belt. He found her in the garden plot, examining the dormant beds. "Planning for spring?" he asked. "Seeing what was," she replied. "Squash here, beans. These look like potato hills." "You know gardens." "I know many things the valley chose to ignore." He skinned the rabbit with practiced efficiency while she watched from the porch. His hands were steady, precise, not violent, but practical. When he was done, he showed her the root cellar. Stocks for winter potatoes, turnips, carrots in sand, preserved vegetables, smoked meat. "We're well supplied," he said. "But if there's anything particular you need from town—" "I won't be going to town." "No," he agreed. "Neither of us needs that." That evening, as she helped to prepare the rabbit, she felt something she hadn't expected, not happiness. Too early for that, but possibility. This strange man with his bees and books, his careful distance and unexpected kindnesses, had offered her what the civilized valley never had: dignity in exile, purpose in punishment. When he handed her a cup of pine needle tea after supper, their fingers brushed. He didn't jerk away. Neither did she. "Tomorrow," he said, "if you're willing, I'll show you the bee houses. They're sleeping for winter, but there's work preparing for spring." "I'd like that," she said, meaning it. Outside, wind sang through the pines, and snow began to fall, the first of the season, soft as forgiveness, covering the harsh path that had brought her here. In the morning, it would all look different, clean and new. A beginning disguised as an ending, a rescue dressed as exile. The axe bit deep into pine, each strike echoing off the mountain walls. Eliza watched Jonah's measured swings, learning the rhythm lift, arc, drive through. When he paused to stack the split wood, she stepped forward. "Show me." He looked up, sweat beading despite the November cold. "It's heavy work." "I've done heavy work." He handed her the axe, adjusting her grip without condescension. "Feet apart, like this. Let the weight do the work. Don't fight it." His hands guided hers once, then stepped back. "Aim for the same spot. The wood wants to split, you're just helping it along." Her first swing glanced off. The second stuck. On the third, the log cracked clean through. The satisfaction was immediate, primal. "Good," Jonah said simply. But his approval warmed her more than the exertion. Over the following weeks, he taught her the mountain's winter ways, how to bank the fire to last through bitter nights, reading clouds which brought snow, which brought ice, which might strand them for days. The different tracks in fresh powder deer, rabbit, fox, the occasional mountain cat to avoid. "See how the snow's disturbed here?" He crouched beside a drift one morning. "Bear, probably 3 days ago, looking for one last meal before the deep sleep." She learned to move quietly on snowshoes he'd fashioned from bent willow and sinew, to gauge temperature by the sound of creek ice, to identify which trees burned hot and fast, which slow and steady through the night. But it was the medicinal plants that revealed her knowledge. They were gathering kindling when she spotted the familiar bark pattern. "Willow," she said, then caught herself. Too late. "Good for fever," Jonah said casually. "My mother used it." She stayed silent, but he continued pointing as they walked. "That's osha root, the bears dig for it, and there, wild bergamot, grows better in summer, but the dried leaves still hold medicine." "You know herbs." She couldn't hide her surprise. "Some learned from necessity mostly, and from—" He paused. "There's a Shoshone woman, Atsa, lives over the ridge. She trades knowledge for honey and help with heavy work." That evening, a rider approached Tom Collins from the valley's western edge, cradling his left arm. "Heard there was someone up here might help," he said, not quite meeting Eliza's eyes. "Horse spooked, shoulder's not right." Eliza hesitated, but Jonah nodded toward the injured man. "Take a look." Her hands moved without thought, palpating, testing range of motion. "Dislocated," she diagnosed. "I can reset it, but it'll hurt considerably." "Do it!" Tom gasped. She had Jonah hold him steady while she maneuvered the joint. The pop of reset brought Tom's strangled cry, then relief flooding his face. Without thinking, she'd already begun preparing willow bark tea, adding dried meadowsweet from Jonah's stores. "Drink this, rest the arm for 2 weeks, then gentle movement." She fashioned a sling from clean cloth. "If fever develops, send word." Tom left a ham in payment, but more importantly, he left with a story the heart woman knew her business, whatever the valley said about her. Word traveled as word does in mountains. A week later, young Mrs. Creek appeared with her colicky infant, then the Swenson boy with a deep splinter festering. Each time, Eliza looked to Jonah first, and each time he simply cleared the table for her work. She discovered his own medical knowledge by accident. The Hendricks girl arrived fevered and gasping, her mother near panic. Eliza recognized the labored breathing she'd seen it before, though rarely. "The membrane in her throat," she said quietly to Jonah. "If it's what I think." "Diphtheria," he finished. "I've seen it in army camps." They worked without discussion, knowing the stakes. Jonah rigged attentive sheets over the child, heating water to steam while Eliza prepared what treatments she had. He monitored the girl's pulse with surprising expertise, calling out rates while Eliza adjusted doses. "You've done this before," she said during a brief respite. "Field hospital, after Antietam. Helped the surgeons when my scouting was done." His voice stayed neutral. but she saw the darkness pass through his eyes. Learned enough to know how much I didn't know. Through the night they fought for the child's breath. Jonah's steadiness anchored her when exhaustion threatened. When dawn came and the girl's breathing eased, they stood together on the porch, sharing the wild relief that comes after cheating death. "You're a healer," he said simply. The town said otherwise. The town's full of fools who think a woman's only worth is her womb. The bluntness should have stung. Instead, she felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening, like ice releasing a frozen stream. His workshop became her second education. She'd find him there in evening hours, shaping wood with careful patience. The walls held tools arranged with military precision, each worn handle polished from use. Maps covered one wall, hand-drawn trails through the mountains, marked with symbols she didn't recognize. "Scout maps," he explained when she asked. "Old habit. Know every path, every water source, every shelter. Never know when you'll need to move fast or hide well." She traced a route with her finger. "You could leave any time, go anywhere." "Could," he agreed, not looking up from his planing. "But I'm where I need to be." One night, she found him fitting joints for what would become a rocking chair. His hands moved with unconscious grace, testing each connection. She thought of those same hands setting young Emma's broken arm the week before, gentle despite their strength. "My grandmother was a midwife," she said suddenly. "Back in Ireland, before the hunger drove them here. She delivered half of County Cork. My mother said." Jonah's hands didn't pause, but he was listening. "She taught my mother, who taught me. Herbs and birthing, reading sickness in the eyes, feeling truth in a pulse." She picked up a smooth piece of scrap wood, running her thumb along the grain. "I helped with my first birth when I was 12. Saved my first fever patient at 15. But none of that mattered when I couldn't when my womb." "Their loss," Jonah said quietly. "Our gain." That night, she showed him her hidden medical texts, pulled from the false bottom of her satchel. He studied them with interest, asking questions that showed quick understanding. In return, he brought out an anatomy book, water-damaged but readable. "Traded 20 pounds of honey for it," he admitted. "Figured knowledge was worth more than sweetness." She laughed, actually laughed for the first time since Thomas died. December brought the Collins boy, burning with fever, malaria, contracted from his cousins visiting from the Mississippi lowlands. Eliza had seen it before, but never treated it alone. "Cinchona bark," she told Jonah, "but I don't have any." "Atsa might." He was already reaching for his coat. "I'll go." He returned after midnight with the precious bark and the Shoshone woman herself. Atsa was ancient, face mapped with decades of mountain weather, but her eyes were sharp as she watched Eliza work. "You know the old ways," Atsa said in careful English. "Some, not enough." "Enough to learn more." She placed a leather pouch on the table. "Dogbane for the heartsick, prairie smoke for the bone break. You come to me when the snow melts, I teach." After they'd broken the boy's fever, after Atsa had gone, Jonah found Eliza crying silently by the fire, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. To be seen, to be valued for what she could do, not condemned for what she couldn't. He didn't speak, just handed her his handkerchief and added another log to the fire. But later, she found he'd mounted a shelf in the main room, perfect height for medicine bottles, right where the morning light would help her read labels. "Thank you," she said simply. "Partners help each other," he replied. And she realized that's what they'd become. Not man and wife, not master and exile, but partners, equal, necessary. The realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The morning sun cast long shadows through the eastern window, illuminating dust motes that danced above the examination table Jonah had built. It was sturdy pine, sanded smooth, now covered with a clean quilt. The room that had been simply hers had transformed over the winter months into something more, a makeshift clinic with shelves of medicines, clean linens, and her grandmother's instruments laid out precisely. Eliza stood at the window, watching spring melt feed the creek below. The words she needed to say had been building for weeks, pressing against her ribs like trapped birds. "Why did you accept me?" She didn't turn around. "The truth. Jonah. Why take a woman the town declared barren?" She heard his chair creak, then his footsteps approaching. He stopped a respectful distance behind her. "You want the truth. I was lonely. 6 years of only my own voice gets heavy." He paused. "But also I didn't believe them. About my condition. About any of it. The doctor who declared you barren Abernathy, he's the same fool who bled James Morrison to death trying to cure pneumonia. The same man who told the widow Patterson her headaches were hysteria when she had a tumor big as a walnut." Eliza turned to face him. "You knew?" "I suspected. Small towns love their verdicts, especially about women. When the council came to me with their proposition, a discarded woman for the hermit on the mountain, I saw an opportunity." "For what?" "To help someone who needed helping, and maybe find someone who could help me back." His gray eyes held hers steady. "I've seen enough of death, Eliza. Caused enough of it. These hands." He held them up, palms out. "They've ended more lives than saved. I thought maybe having someone here who knew healing would balance the scales." "Something like that." She took a breath, then another. "I need to know, for certain, about my body." Understanding dawned in his expression. "You want an examination?" "I trust your knowledge. I've seen you work." Her voice stayed clinical, though her hands trembled. "I need to know if they were right." Jonah was quiet for a long moment. "You're certain this kind of examination, it's intimate, personal?" "I know what it involves. I have assisted with them, though never—" She straightened her shoulders. "I need to know." He nodded slowly. "Then we do this properly, professionally." He moved to the basin, washing his hands with the lye soap, then again with alcohol. "I'll explain everything before I do it. You stop me at any point, for any reason." She prepared herself behind the screen he'd installed for patient privacy, hands shaking as she arranged the draping. When she emerged and lay on the table, he talked through each step with the same calm voice he used when teaching her to read animal signs. "First, I'll check your general health. Pulse, lymph nodes, abdomen." His hands were clinical, professional, warmer than the mountain air. "Good. Strong. Now, I need to palpate your lower abdomen. This might be uncomfortable." She stared at the ceiling beams, counting knots in the wood. His touch was careful, methodical. She'd expected shame, but found only relief at being examined with actual medical purpose. "The external examination shows no abnormalities," he said quietly. "For the internal examination, I'll be as quick and gentle as possible." She gripped the table's edge, not from pain, but from the weight of waiting. Years of being called barren, failed, worthless, all hanging on these moments. Jonah's expression remained professionally neutral as he worked, but she caught the slight furrow of his brow. When he finished, he covered her immediately with the quilt and moved to wash his hands again, giving her a moment to breathe. "Well," her voice came out cracked. He pulled a chair close to the table, sitting so they were eye level. "Eliza, I need you to hear this clearly. Your reproductive organs are completely normal, healthy. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your body." The words didn't make sense. "But Thomas and I, 2 years—" "Could have been him, could have been timing, could have been stress or nutrition or 100 other factors. But it is not, and was never, your fault." His voice turned hard. "Abernathy never examined you, did he?" She shook her head, tears starting to fall. "He said it wasn't necessary, that my failure to conceive was evidence enough." "The bastard!" The profanity was quiet but vehement. "Condemned you without even looking, without even trying to know." The sob that escaped her came from somewhere deep. a place she'd locked when the town's judgment had fallen. Jonah didn't touch her, didn't offer empty comfort, just stayed steady beside her while years of shame cracked and fell away. When she could speak again, she asked, "You're certain?" "As certain as examination can be. Your anatomy is perfect. If you wanted children, if circumstances were different, I see no physical reason you couldn't have them." She sat up slowly, wrapping the quilt around her shoulders. "They sent me away for nothing, branded me as worthless for nothing." "Not for nothing," Jonah said quietly. "For their own small-mindedness, for their need to blame someone when life doesn't follow their scripts." That evening, after she'd dressed and composed herself, they sat by the fire. The examination table had been returned to its corner, covered again with its everyday cloth, but something fundamental had shifted between them. "I owe you more than I can say," Eliza began. "You owe me nothing. Medical knowledge belongs to whoever needs it." "That's not what I mean." She watched the flames dance. "You gave me back myself, my worth beyond what the town decided I was." He added a log to the fire, sparks rising up the chimney. "You always had worth. I just held up a mirror so you could see it." She thought about his hands, steady, clinical, respectful. How different from the crude jokes she'd overheard about what the mountain man would do with his punishment bride. How wrong they'd all been about both of them. "The contract," she said suddenly. "The one the town made. What were the real terms?" Jonah stood and went to his desk, pulling out a folded paper. "They wanted me to take you as property, to use as I saw fit, to report back on your compliance." "And what did you agree to?" "Nothing they asked for." He handed her a different paper, his own writing. "I wrote my own terms. You stay as long as you choose. You leave when you wish. You're free to practice your medicine, and if anyone from town comes checking on their punishment, we tell them whatever keeps you safe." She read his careful script, the legal language he'd taught himself. Protection, autonomy, respect, everything the valley had denied her. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I've seen what happens when people are treated as less than human. In the war, after..." His jaw tightened. "I won't be part of that. Not again." The fire popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls. "Outside?" an owl called, its voice carrying across the hollow, the sound of the wilderness that had become home. "Jonah!" She set down the paper. "What if I don't want to leave?" "Then you stay. As what? Your housekeeper, your medical assistant. As whatever you choose to be." He met her eyes directly. "My partner, if you're willing, in medicine, in maintaining this place, in whatever comes." Partner. The word held weight. Promise, possibility. Not wife that carried too much of what the valley had made it mean, but partner that was something they could define themselves. "Yes," she said simply. "Partners." He held out his hand to shake on it, formal as any business agreement. But when their hands met, she felt the calluses from his work, the steadiness that had examined her with such respect, the strength that had never once been used to diminish her. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me as more than my womb." "Thank you," he replied, "for seeing me as more than my past." They released hands, but the connection remained. Two people the valley had discarded, finding worth in each other's eyes, building something new from the ashes of what they'd been told they should be. That night, she lay in her bed, still her bed, her room, her choice, and felt the absence of weight she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her. The shame was gone. In its place, something new and fierce and free. Tomorrow, she would write in her medical journal about the examination. Clinical and clear, she would document the truth of her body, evidence against the lies. And she would continue learning, healing, becoming who she was meant to be. Not barren, not worthless, not punished. Whole. The official envelope arrived with the supply wagon, its wax seal bearing the territorial court's mark. Eliza's hand stilled on the herbs she'd been sorting. Jonah took the letter, his expression darkening as he read. "Marriage contract of servitude," he said flatly. "Terms of your rehabilitation under my authority." He spread the document on the table, its language cold as winter iron. "You're to provide complete obedience, household management, and produce offspring within 24 months. Any practice of unlicensed medical activities will result in criminal charges." "They're making it official," Eliza said. "Legal chains to replace the social ones." "There's more." Jonah pointed to the final paragraph. "I'm to provide quarterly reports on your compliance. First one due next month." She sank into a chair, the morning's work forgotten. Through the window, she could see neighbors from the mountain community going about their day: the Creek family, the Collins, the Swedish loggers who'd settled the North Ridge, people who'd come to trust her hands, her knowledge. "I won't sign it," Jonah said. "They'll send marshals." "Let them try finding us if we don't want to be found. These mountains." A cry from outside cut him short. Young Sarah Creek came running, face white with terror. "Mrs. Eliza, it's Emma, she's dying." They ran. The Creek cabin was only a quarter mile through the pines, but it felt like leagues. Inside, they found 12-year-old Emma Creek writhing on her bed, clutching her lower belly. Her skin burned with fever, her mother sobbing beside her. "Started yesterday," Mrs. Creek gasped. "Just stomach pain. We thought, but now—" Eliza's hands moved over the girl's abdomen, feeling the rigid muscles, the point of maximum tenderness. She knew before she even finished the examination. "Appendicitis advanced." She looked at Jonah. "If it ruptures, she'll die." He completed the thought grimly. "Town's doctor is 8 hours away. If the roads are clear, which they're not." "Mr. Creek said from the doorway, storm washed out the lower bridge yesterday." Eliza stood slowly. "I could try to operate." The room went silent except for Emma's moans. "You've done this before?" Mrs. Creek asked. "I've assisted. I know the anatomy, the procedure." Eliza met each of their eyes. "But I won't lie, it's dangerous. She could die on the table, but without it, she will die, probably within hours." "Do it," Mr. Creek said immediately. "We trust you. The contract if they find out." "Damn the contract," Mrs. Creek snapped. "Save my daughter." They carried Emma to Jonah's cabin, to the room that had become Eliza's clinic, the kitchen table, scrubbed with lye and covered with boiled sheets, would serve as an operating surface. Atsa arrived within the hour, bringing additional herbs and her steady presence. "I'll manage the anesthetic," Jonah said, measuring chloroform carefully. "I've done it before, in field hospitals." "I need more hands," Eliza said, arranging instruments she'd sterilized in boiling water. "Someone to manage bleeding, someone to hold retractors." "I helped with butchering since I was small," offered Eric Swenson, one of the loggers. "Steady hands, strong stomach." "Good enough." They worked by lamplight, the storm having brought early darkness. Eliza's hands shook as she made the first incision, but Jonah's calm voice steadied her. "Good depth, clean line. You're doing fine." The appendix, when she found it, was angry red, swollen near to bursting. One wrong move would spill infection throughout the girl's belly. She worked with infinite care, tying off blood vessels with silk thread, isolating the diseased organ. "Pulse is steady," Jonah reported. "She's stable." The removal itself took less than a minute once she'd prepared properly. But closing required equal precision layers of sutures, each one critical to healing. Her shoulders screamed from tension, sweat dripping despite the cool air. "Last suture," she announced, tying off the final knot. Emma's breathing was regular, her color already improving. The operation had taken 2 hours that felt like days. "Will she live, Mrs.?" Creek asked from the doorway where she'd been praying. If infection doesn't set in, if the sutures hold, if she rests properly, yes. Eliza swayed on her feet, exhaustion hitting suddenly. Someone needs to stay with her constantly for the next day. I'll take first watch, Atsa said. You need rest. But rest wouldn't come. Eliza sat by the fire, hands finally allowed to tremble. Jonah brought her coffee laced with whiskey. You did it, he said quietly. You saved her. We saved her, all of us. She took a shaking sip. But when word gets out, then word gets out. He sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The whole mountain community saw what you did. They'll stand by you. Against the territorial court, if necessary. 3 days later, Emma woke asking for water. A week later, she was sitting up, the incision healing clean. The mountain folk brought gifts, preserved meat, knitted goods, promises of silence that everyone knew wouldn't hold. Stories like this were too powerful to contain. The second week, when Emma took her first wobbling steps, the expected visitors arrived. Not marshals, but Judge Rusk himself, accompanied by Dr. Abernathy and 2 territorial officials. Their horses picked their way up the trail, shoes ringing on stone. Jonah met them on the porch, rifle prominently displayed, though not aimed. Gentlemen, Mr. Reed. The judge dismounted stiffly. We've heard disturbing reports, unauthorized medical procedures, direct violation of the contract terms. What contract? Jonah asked mildly. I haven't signed anything. The one sent 2 weeks ago. Must have gotten lost. Mountain mail is unreliable. He shifted the rifle slightly. You're welcome to come in. Have coffee. But I should mention, the entire Creek family is inside. Also, the Swensons, the Collins, most of the mountain. Actually, they're quite interested in discussing Emma Creek's miraculous recovery from her stomach ailment. Dr. Abernathy pushed forward. If someone performed surgery. Surgery. Eliza appeared in the doorway, wearing her simple work dress, hands visibly rough from honest labor. I'm just a barren woman. Doctor, what would I know of surgery? We have testimony. From who? Old Mister. Collins stepped out from the side of the house, followed by his sons. Haven't seen anything but neighbors helping neighbors. More mountain folk emerged from the tree line, from behind the cabin, from the barn. Silent, armed, unified. The judge's men shifted nervously. Perhaps we should examine the girl. Doctor, Abernathy suggested. Certainly. Mrs. Creek appeared with Emma, who walked slowly but steadily. Doctor, please look at my daughter's mosquito bite. It was quite inflamed, but Mrs. Reed's honey poultice worked wonders. Emma lifted her shirt edge just enough to show a neat bandage. It hardly hurts at all now. Doctor, Abernathy reached for the bandage, but Jonah's voice stopped him cold. The child's been through enough, unless you have a legal warrant to examine her person. The judge looked around at the assembled mountain people, men who'd fought in various wars, women who'd buried children to disease, all standing behind the woman they deemed worthy. Not because she could bear children, but because she could save them. Mrs. Reed. The judge began. Actually, Eliza interrupted. It's just Miss Hart. Mr. Reed and I aren't married. We're business partners. He provides housing, I provide household management, all very proper and contractual. The servitude contract. Which contract? Jonah pulled out a paper. This is the only agreement between us, room, board, and mutual assistance. Nothing about marriage or other obligations. The judge read quickly, his frown deepening. It was legally perfect. Filed with a sympathetic clerk in the territorial capital weeks ago, superseding any unsigned contract. This is highly irregular, but legal, Jonah said firmly. Unless you're suggesting the territorial government can force marriages against citizens' will. The judge looked at his companions, at the mountain folk, at Emma Creek standing alive when she should be dead. The political calculation was clear: push this issue and face a mountain community united in rebellion, or retreat and maintain the fiction of authority. "We'll need to review the documentation," he said finally. "In the meantime, Miss Hart should refrain from any activities that could be construed as medical practice." "Of course," Eliza agreed. "I'm just a barren woman tending house. Although," she paused thoughtfully, "if neighbors ask for traditional remedies, my grandmother taught me herbs for stomach upset. Poultices for wounds, surely that's just folkways, not medicine." "Dr." Abernathy's face purpled, but the judge raised a hand. "Traditional remedies shared between neighbors are acceptable." They left soon after, their authority blunted against mountain solidarity. As their horses disappeared down the trail, Emma Creek tugged Eliza's sleeve. "Miss Eliza, am I really going to be all right?" Eliza knelt, checking the girl's pupils, her pulse, the healing warmth of healthy skin. "You're going to be perfect, little one, strong as the mountains." That night, the community celebrated quietly in Jonah's cabin. No one spoke of the surgery directly, but everyone knew what had happened. They'd chosen their healer over the law, their neighbor over the valley's judgment. "You realize this isn't over," Jonah said quietly to Eliza as they cleaned up after the others left. "I know." She dried a plate carefully. "But Emma's alive." "That's worth whatever comes." He took the plate from her hands, setting it aside. "You're worth whatever comes. This community knows it. I know it." The weight of the day, the week, the confrontation settled on her suddenly. She leaned against the counter, and without thinking, Jonah's arms came around her. Not romantic, not possessive, just the solid comfort of a partner who understood. "We stand together," he said into her hair. "Whatever comes." Spring arrived with meadowlarks and melting snow, the creek running high and wild below the cabin. Eliza found Jonah on the porch at dawn, coffee cooling in his hands as he watched the sun paint the peaks gold. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, settling into the other chair. "Dreams," he said simply. "The war dreams." She knew. They came less often now, but never fully departed. She reached across the space between chairs, her fingers brushing his. He turned his hand palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. It was the first time they'd held hands without medical purpose. "Eliza," his voice was rough, "I need to say something." Her heart stuttered, but she kept her voice steady. "Then say it." "I'm not good with words, better with actions. Always have been." He looked at their joined hands. "But you deserve words. You deserve to know that somewhere between that first day you arrived and now, He stopped, started again. "You've become essential, not just for the work or the companionship. You've become the first thing I think of at dawn and the last at night." "Jonah!" "Let me finish." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know what we have isn't what the valley expected, isn't what anyone expected. But I'd like to make it real, if you're willing. Not because of contracts or expectations, but because I love you." The words hung in the morning air like dew on spider silk, fragile and perfect. "You love me," she whispered, "even knowing I might never give you children." "I love you because of who you are, not what you might produce." His gray eyes met hers directly. "You're brilliant, brave, stubborn as a mountain winter. You save lives with those hands. You've saved me, in ways you probably don't even know." She thought of all the small moments, him building shelves for her medicines, her mending his shirts with tiny, careful stitches, shared silences that said more than words, the way he'd stood between her and the judge's condemnation. "I love you too," she said, the words easier than expected. Not from gratitude or proximity, but genuinely. "You see me, Jonah, the real me, not the failed wife or the barren woman or even just the healer. You see, Eliza." He lifted their joined hands, kissing her knuckles softly. Then marry me, properly this time. Our choice, our terms. Yes, she said, no hesitation. Yes. They were married 3 days later in the meadow where the first wildflowers pushed through. No judge or town official Atsa performed the ceremony in the old way, binding their hands with sweetgrass while the mountain community stood witness. Eliza wore her mother's blue dress, carefully preserved. Jonah wore his cleanest shirt and a look of wonder that made her chest tight. Their vows were simple, honest, to stand together, to heal what could be healed, to protect each other and their community, to choose love daily, deliberately. In the eyes of the mountain, you are one, Atsa declared. And the celebration began fiddle music, venison roasting, children running through the grass with flower crowns. That night, in the bed that was now theirs, Jonah traced the calluses on her hands with infinite tenderness. My wife, he said, testing the words. My husband, she replied, and kissed him properly for the first time. What followed was gentle, patient, a conversation of bodies learning each other. He was careful, she was sure, and together they found a rhythm as natural as breathing. Afterward, lying tangled together, she felt complete in a way that had nothing to do with conception and everything to do with connection. 2 weeks into their true marriage, the territorial delegation returned. This time, they brought a federal marshal and a court order. Eliza Hart Reed. The marshal read from his paper. You are summoned to appear before the Territorial Medical Board to answer charges of practicing medicine without license. She hasn't practiced medicine, Jonah said firmly. We have sworn testimony. Doctor, Abernathy looked triumphant. From your own community. Eliza's heart sank, but then she saw who stepped forward, Samuel Morrison, whose father had died under Abernathy's bleeding treatments. I testified, Samuel said clearly. That doctor, Abernathy, killed my father with incompetence, that he never examined Mrs. Reed before declaring her barren, that he's refused to treat mountain folk who couldn't pay in advance. That's not... I also testified, Mrs. Collins added, about my son's malaria, how Dr. Abernathy said it was just mountain fever and to let it run its course. Would have died if not for Mrs. Reed. One by one, the mountain people spoke, not about Emma's surgery, which stayed carefully unmentioned, but about Abernathy's failures, his cruelties, his casual dismissal of their lives. This is about her illegal practice, the marshal began. Actually, a new voice interrupted, it's about justice. Everyone turned. Coming up the trail was an unexpected figure doctor, Margaret Westwood from Helena, one of the few licensed female physicians in the territory. Behind her rode 2 other women in traveling clothes. Dr. Westwood, Abernathy sputtered. What are you doing here? Investigating complaints against you, doctor. She dismounted with practiced ease. The Territorial Medical Board has received numerous concerns about your practices. Meanwhile, I've been asked to evaluate Mrs. Reed's knowledge for potential formal training and licensing. That's not women can't. Women can and do. Doctor, I'm licensed, as are my colleagues here. She turned to Eliza. Mrs. Reed, would you consent to an evaluation of your medical knowledge? I would. What followed was 3 hours of intensive questioning. Doctor, Westwood asked about anatomy, treatments, diagnostic procedures. She presented hypothetical cases, asked for treatment plans, challenged decisions. Eliza answered steadily, her years of study and practice evident. Your knowledge exceeds many licensed physicians. Doctor, Westwood concluded, with 6 months of formal training to fill certain gaps, you could easily pass the territorial licensing examination. This is ridiculous, Abernathy protested. She's a barren woman. I'm curious about that diagnosis. Doctor, Westwood said coolly, Mrs. Reed. Have you been properly examined? I have, by someone with actual medical training. Eliza looked directly at Abernathy. The examination showed I'm completely healthy. The failure to conceive during my first marriage could have had many causes, none of them my fault. Who performed this examination? The marshal asked. Jonah stepped forward. I did, under supervision from Atsa, who has 50 years of midwifery experience. You're not a doctor. Neither is Abernathy, by any real measure. Doctor, Westwood said sharply. His license was granted 20 years ago with no examination, just political connections, Mrs. Reed shows more knowledge in her smallest finger than he's displayed in his entire career. The marshal looked uncomfortable. The law is still the law, which is why I'm offering Mrs. Reed a formal apprenticeship. Doctor, Westwood announced. 6 months split between Helena and here, then licensing examination, all perfectly legal. And in the meantime, she continues as she has a neighbor helping neighbors with traditional remedies. Doctor, Westwood smiled slightly. Unless someone wants to arrest half the women in the territory for the same crime. The delegation left in defeat, Abernathy's protests echoing off the mountains. But Dr. Westwood stayed for dinner, talking with Eliza about the apprenticeship, about the future of medicine in the territories, about the slow change coming. Why help me? Eliza asked as they walked in the evening garden. Because medicine needs women like you, trained, compassionate, willing to go where others won't. She paused by the bee boxes, listening to their hum. And because I've heard about Emma Creek, what you did, what you risked, that's the kind of courage we need. That night, as Eliza told Jonah about the apprenticeship offer, she expected him to be pleased. Instead, she found worry in his eyes. 6 months is a long time. You'll be away. Only 3 months total in Helena, split into shorter visits. She took his hands. This is the chance to make it official, to practice without fear. I know, and you should take it. It's just, he pulled her close. I finally have you. The thought of being apart. You have me forever, she said against his chest. Licensed or not, here or there, you have me. They made love slowly that night, memorizing each other, storing up touches against future separation. But beneath the melancholy was excitement, the future opening before them, full of possibility. A week later, as she prepared for her first trip to Helena, she found a package on the bed. Inside was a leather medical bag, beautifully crafted, her initials tooled into the surface EHUR. For the official doctor in the family, Jonah said from the doorway. She ran her fingers over the smooth leather, then over the rough hands that had made it. We did it, she said wonderingly. We turned their punishment into purpose. No, he corrected, kissing her forehead. You did that yourself. I just stood witness. But she knew better. They'd done it together, two discarded people building something beautiful from the pieces they'd been left. Love born not from convenience or contract, but from choice, respect, and the daily decision to see each other whole. The Helena Grand Hotel's gaslight flickered against polished brass and crystal, a world away from the honest light of mountain stars. Eliza stood at the registration desk in her best dress, still plain by city standards, while the clerk eyed her with barely concealed disdain. The medical conference registrants are in the East Wing, he said, sliding a key across marble. Though I believe the nurse's accommodation is... I'm a physician delegate, not a nurse. She took the key firmly. Doctor, Westwood's apprentice. His expression shifted to surprise, then something like respect. My apologies, Doctor. The bellman will show you up. The conference hall buzzed with voices, mostly male, scattered with the few women who'd fought their way into medicine. Eliza felt like a sparrow among peacocks, until Dr. Westwood appeared at her elbow. Imposing, isn't it? I threw up my first conference, right in the potted palm. She guided Eliza toward a group of women. Come, meet your compatriots. The women physicians welcomed her with understanding smiles. Dr. Sarah Chen, Chinese-trained and Western-certified. Dr. Louise Blackwater, a Cheyenne woman who'd studied at the Women's Medical College. Dr. Anna Peterson, whose accent revealed Norwegian roots. Mountain practice. Dr. Chen mused after hearing Eliza's story. The hardest and most honest medicine. You'll teach us more than we teach you. The first presentation slot was Eliza's. Her hands trembled as she arranged her materials, pressed samples of mountain herbs. Careful drawings. Her treatment journal with Emma Creek's case carefully anonymized. Highland Botanical Medicine, Traditional Remedies in Modern Practice, she began, voice steadying as she found her rhythm. She spoke of Osha root's antibacterial properties, willow bark's fever reduction, the careful balance of indigenous knowledge and scientific method. These aren't primitive folkways, she said firmly. They're sophisticated pharmacology developed over generations. We dismiss them at our patients' peril. A man in the front row, Dr. Harrison from Denver, raised his hand. Surely you're not suggesting we abandon modern medicine for savage remedies. I'm suggesting we abandon the arrogance that assumes all wisdom comes from universities. She met his gaze steadily. The Shoshone woman who taught me has saved more lives than half this room combined. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Doctor. Westwood stood. Mrs. Reed makes an important point. How many of us use digitalis morphine quinine, all derived from traditional plant medicine? Why should we ignore the pharmacopoeia in our own mountains? The debate that followed was heated but productive. By the session's end, 3 doctors had requested copies of her herbal preparations guide, and a publisher had approached about a book. That evening, at the conference dinner, Eliza found herself seated between Dr. Harrison and a younger physician, Dr. James Thornton. Harrison ignored her, but Thornton leaned in with interest. That case you mentioned, the emergency appendectomy, remarkable technique for field conditions. She chose her words carefully. Mountain people are resourceful. We make do with what we have. Indeed, I'd like to observe your practice. If possible, real medicine happens in places like yours, not these gilded halls. Later, in her room, she wrote to Jonah by lamplight. Asterisk, my beloved husband. The city is overwhelming but educational. I've met women who've walked this path before me, who understand the fight. They've shared techniques, books, connections. Dr. Chen showed me acupuncture points for pain relief. Dr. Blackwater taught me birthing positions that ease difficult labor. But I miss the mountains. I miss our quiet mornings, your steady presence, the honest work of our hands. 3 more weeks. Then I come home to you. The publisher wants a book about mountain medicine. Can you imagine my grandmother's wisdom, printed and bound? I said yes, thinking of all the isolated healers who might benefit. Kiss the mountains for me. Your devoted wife, Eliza Asterisk. She attended lectures on surgical techniques, germ theory, new anesthetics. But she also taught informal sessions where city doctors gathered to hear about treating frostbite, altitude sickness, wounds when help was days away. You're causing quite a stir. Doctor, Westwood told her one afternoon. The boards received several letters suggesting you be fast-tracked for licensing. I haven't even completed the apprenticeship. You've completed 20 years of apprenticeship, just not in their halls. She paused. There's something else. The University of Michigan, they have a new program, advanced surgical training for qualified physicians. They've offered you a position. Eliza's breath caught. Michigan. But that's far from your mountains. Yes, 6 months intensive training. You'd learn techniques that could save countless lives. Doctor, Westwood's expression was kind but serious. I won't pretend it wouldn't be difficult, but imagine returning to Reed's Hollow with that knowledge. That night, Eliza walked Helena's streets, wrestling with possibility and longing. Through a telegraph office window, she saw the operator at his key. On impulse, she entered. I need to send a message to Reed's Hollow, Montana territory. The message was brief. Offered advanced training, Michigan, 6 months. Would mean saving more lives. Need to discuss. All my love. E. Jonah's reply came the next morning. Your gift belongs to the world. Go. Learn everything. Bring it home. I'll be waiting. Forever yours. J. She cried in her hotel room, clutching the telegram, loving him more for letting her go. The conference's final day brought an unexpected confrontation. Dr. Abernathy appeared, flanked by territorial officials. This woman is a fraud, he announced to the assembly. She practiced illegally, endangered lives. She saved lives. Dr. Thornton stood. I've investigated the Creek case. The girl would have died without intervention. She had no right. She had every right. Doctor. Blackwater rose. The right of knowledge. The right of compassion. The right of being there when you weren't. One by one, Doctor stood not all, but enough. A statement, a recognition. Dr. Westwood approached the podium. The Territorial Medical Board has reviewed Mrs. Reed's qualifications extensively. We're prepared to offer provisional licensing, pending completion of advanced training. The vote was called, passed by a margin wider than expected. Abernathy stormed out, but not before Eliza caught his arm. Doctor, she said quietly, I forgive you. For the diagnosis, for the condemnation, you acted from ignorance, not malice. But learn from this. Medicine is changing. Make sure you change with it. His face purpled, but something in her steady gaze stopped his reply. He left without another word. The journey home took 3 days. She saw Jonah before the stage even stopped standing tall, thinner than she'd left him, his gray eyes bright with joy. He lifted her from the coach, spinning her around while the other passengers smiled. Dr. Reed, he said against her hair, my brilliant wife. Not quite doctor yet. Always were to me. Their reunion that night was tender and desperate. Months of separation dissolved in touch and whisper. Later, as they lay entwined, she told him about Michigan. When would you leave? Spring. Return by autumn. He was quiet so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, we'll make the most of winter then. They did. Between her remaining apprenticeship trips to Helena, they worked side by side. She taught him what she'd learned. He taught her what he'd always known: patience, steadiness, the art of waiting. They delivered babies, set bones, fought fever, and loved with an intensity sharpened by approaching separation. The night before she left for Michigan, the mountain community gathered. Atsa presented her with a medicine bundle: herbs, stones, an eagle feather. You carry our medicine with you, the old woman said. Bring back their medicine to us. Emma Creek, fully healed, gave her a pressed flower. So you remember spring here? Jonah gave her nothing that night, but at the stage stop, he pressed a wrapped package into her hands. Open it when you're lonely. Inside, she found his journal pages of his careful handwriting, notes about her cases, observations of her techniques, but also memories. The first time she smiled after arriving, how the sunlight caught her hair while she worked, why he loved her, a list that went on for pages. So you remember, he said roughly, that someone sees you complete. She kissed him there, in front of God and the stage driver and the mountains. 6 months, she promised. I'd wait 6 years, 60. As the stage pulled away, she looked back to see him standing straight and strong, the mountain man who'd become her salvation. He raised one hand, not goodbye, but promise. Michigan beckoned with its knowledge and challenges, but the mountains would always be home, and Jonah would always be her true north. She would learn everything they had to teach and bring it back to the people who needed it most. The girl sent to the mountain as punishment had become a woman choosing the mountain as purpose. The exile had become exodus not from, but toward knowledge, toward healing, toward the life she and Jonah would build with their joined hands and united hearts. The clinic stood complete in the morning light, its log walls chinked tight, windows facing east to catch the dawn. Glass panes hauled up the mountain at considerable expense let in clear light for delicate work. Jonah had built it while Eliza was in Michigan, each board placed with the same precision he'd once used planning military campaigns. "It's perfect," Eliza breathed, running her hands along the smooth-planed examination table. "Look at this." Jonah opened a cabinet to reveal rows of shelves, each sized for medicine bottles, instruments, supplies. And here, he pulled a lever, and a section of wall swung out, revealing hidden storage. For the medicines that shouldn't be obvious to unfriendly eyes. A year had passed since her return from Michigan, her head full of surgical techniques and modern theories. She'd brought back more than knowledge instruments ordered from Chicago, textbooks, a microscope that had cost 3 months of Jonah's honey sales. Dr. Reed. The call came from outside. Sarah Creek, 18 now and determined, stood in the doorway with Hannah Collins and a young Shoshone woman. "Sarah, Hannah, and Chaska." Eliza recognized Atsa's grandniece. "What brings you here?" "We want to learn," Sarah said firmly. "Real medicine, not just herb gathering and bandage rolling, but everything. Everything is a lifetime of study." "Then we'd better start now," Hannah replied. Eliza looked at their eager faces, remembering her own hunger for knowledge. "Very well. Monday mornings. Arrive at dawn. Bring notebooks." Word spread. Within a month, 5 young women gathered in the clinic each Monday. Eliza taught anatomy using drawings and careful explanation, demonstrated sutures on pigskin, drilled them on herb identification and dosages. "Why the liver?" she'd ask, pointing to a diagram. "Processes blood, removes toxins, produces bile for digestion." Chaska would answer in careful English, her accent adding music to medical terms. The teaching gave structure to days that had found their own rhythm. Mornings in the clinic, afternoons making rounds to mountain families, evenings with Jonah in their expanded cabin. He'd added rooms of proper surgery, a recovery area, quarters for patients' families who traveled far. The test came in February. A logging accident 3 men crushed when a load shifted. The closest doctor was snowbound in Helena. The men arrived on sledges, blood stark against no. "Sarah, prepare the surgery. Hannah, start boiling water. Chaska, get the ether." Eliza's training took over. "Jonah, I need you to assist." They worked through the night. One man's leg was beyond saving. She amputated below the knee with Jonah steadying her hands when exhaustion shook them. The second had internal injuries she repaired using techniques learned in Michigan. The third, miraculously, only had broken ribs and a punctured lung that she managed to reinflate. All 3 survived. "You did it," Jonah said as dawn broke, finding her slumped in a chair. "We did it. The girls were magnificent. You were magnificent. Come." He led her to their room, helped her out of blood-stained clothes, washed her hands and face with warm water. "Sleep? I'll watch over them." But sleep wouldn't come immediately. "Jonah, do you ever regret not having children?" His hands stilled on her hair. "Where's this coming from?" "The girl's teaching them it's the closest I'll come to passing something on." He turned her to face him. "Eliza, look at what you've built. Sarah knows how to set bones because of you. Hannah can diagnose pneumonia at a glance. Chaska bridges 2 medical traditions. Every child you've delivered, every fever you've broken, that's your legacy. But your legacy is this place, these people, you." He kissed her forehead. "Though, what?" "There's something I've been thinking about. The Nez Perce band that comes through there's a boy, Joseph, about 7. His parents died of smallpox. The tribe cares for him, but you want to adopt him? I want us to consider it, not to replace what we can't have, but to share what we do have. Spring brought the boy to them, thin and wary, speaking little English, but his eyes were bright, his hands quick to learn. Within weeks, he was following Jonah on trap lines, helping Eliza roll bandages, chattering and improving English about everything he saw. "Mama, Eliza," he said one day, the name coming naturally. "Why does honey help wounds?" "It prevents corruption," she explained, then caught Jonah's smile. Joseph had said, "Mama." The clinic grew. They added a ward for longer-term patients. The hidden storage became less necessary as territorial laws slowly changed, recognizing her license, her practice. "Doctor." Thornton visited from Helena, amazed at the sophisticated setup. "You've created something remarkable," he said, watching Sarah perform a perfect suture. "A teaching hospital in miniature." "Just meeting needs as they arise." "No, more than that. You're creating the future of frontier medicine." The test of that future came when Judge Rusk arrived, not with threats, but with his daughter. The girl was pale, sweating, clutching her abdomen. "Please," he said simply. "She's all I have." It was appendicitis again, but caught earlier. The surgery went smoothly. Sarah assisting, Hannah managing anesthesia, Chaska monitoring vitals. Joseph held the lamp steady, his small face serious with responsibility. As the judge sat by his recovering daughter's bedside, he pulled out an envelope. "This came for you, from the territorial legislature." Inside was an official apology for the misdiagnosis and subsequent mistreatment of Mrs. Eliza Hart Reed, and the establishment of a scholarship fund for mountain women pursuing medical training. "I pushed for it." Rusk admitted, "What was done to you was wrong. What you've built despite it." He gestured to the clinic, the recovering patients, the young women preparing medicines. "It shames us all." "I don't need apologies," Eliza said, "just support for the next generation." That summer, the clinic hosted its first official class, 12 young women from across the territory, come to learn mountain medicine. Sarah had grown skilled enough to teach basic techniques. Hannah specialized in childbirth assistance. Chaska bridged traditional and modern methods with graceful authority. "Look what you've grown," Atsa said, visiting on a teaching day. The old woman moved slowly now, but her mind remained sharp, like seeds scattered on good ground. The evening of their 5th wedding anniversary, Jonah led Eliza to the meadow where they'd married. A blanket was spread, dinner laid out, stars beginning to emerge. "5 years since you stopped being my punishment and became my partner," he said, pouring wine. "Was I ever really punishment?" "No. You were possibility dressed as penance." He pulled out a wrapped package. "For you." Inside was a stethoscope, specially made, with Dr. Eliza Hart Reed engraved on the chest piece. "It's beautiful. Listen." He placed it on his chest. She heard his heartbeat, strong and steady. But there was something else, another rhythm, faster, lighter. She looked at him in confusion. Then understanding dawned. Her hand went to her own abdomen. "How did you—" "I've been watching you for weeks. The exhaustion, the food aversions, the glow." He smiled. "We're having a baby, aren't we?" Tears came then. 5 years of buried hope suddenly blooming. The one thing we were told couldn't happen. The mountains have a way of proving valleys wrong. She was 2 months along. She calculated. The baby would come in winter, when the clinic was quieter, when her students could manage simpler cases. That night, as Joseph slept in his room, a new life grew within her. Eliza stood at the window watching stars over mountains. The journey from shameful exile to this respected physician, beloved wife, teacher, mother seemed impossible. Yet each step had led naturally to the next, like water finding its course. "Regrets?" Jonah asked, arms circling her from behind. "None. Every hard thing brought us here. Even the punishment." Especially that, how else would I have found you this place myself? He rested his hands on her still flat stomach. Our children will grow up seeing their mother save lives, their father work honest land. They'll know that worth isn't about meeting others' expectations, but about serving where you're planted. Children plural. Joseph, this one, maybe others adopted, fostered, guided. He kissed her neck. We have love enough for dozens. The next morning, Eliza woke to find her students already at work, Sarah teaching sutures to a new girl, Hannah organizing supplies, Chaska preparing tinctures. Joseph was carefully copying anatomical drawings, tongue between his teeth in concentration. This was her legacy, not just the life growing within her, but the knowledge growing in these young minds, the healing spreading through these mountains like ripples on water. What had begun as punishment had become purpose, and purpose had become love multiplied beyond counting. 10 years had passed since Eliza first arrived at Reed's Hollow. The mountain trail, once so treacherous, now bore wagon ruts from regular traffic. Children's laughter echoed across the meadow where the expanded clinic complex stood, the original building, a proper surgery wing, and the newest addition, a teaching dormitory for students. Mama, Papa, look, young Margaret Reed, age 8, ran toward them with a handful of wildflowers. Her brother Thomas, 6, close behind. Joseph, now 17 and tall as Jonah, followed with the fond exasperation of an older sibling. Careful, little ones, Eliza called, her hands occupied with examining Mrs. Swenson's new grandson. At 42, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd found their place in the world. The afternoon sun caught the brass placard by the clinic door. Reed's Hollow Medical Institute, Est 1882. Below it, smaller text, all students welcome. Sarah Creek, now doctor. Sarah Morrison, after marrying the blacksmith's son and completing her certification, emerged from the surgery. Successful removal of a thyroid growth, she announced. Hannah's closing. Hannah Collins had chosen to specialize in obstetrics, becoming the territory's most sought-after midwife. She'd delivered over 200 babies, including Eliza's own Margaret and Thomas, with a loss rate that city hospitals envied. Letter for you, Dr. Reed. Chaska handed over an envelope bearing an official seal. She'd returned from a year studying at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, bringing back knowledge that enriched them all. Eliza opened it, her eyes widening. They've approved the funding. The territorial government will support our rural doctor program, full scholarships for mountain students, with the promise they'll serve underserved communities for 5 years. How many scholarships? Sarah asked eagerly. 6 per year to start. The celebration that evening filled the meadow. Tables groaned under the weight of shared food. Eric Swenson's fiddle sang while children danced. The bee-boxes hummed their eternal chorus, now tended by Joseph, who'd inherited Jonah's gift with them. Judge Rusk, retired now and living in Helena with his healthy daughter and grandchildren, had sent a letter. The legislature recognizes the Reed's Hollow model as the future of territorial medicine, your method of combining traditional knowledge with modern science, of teaching through practice, of serving regardless of payment. It should be replicated throughout the West. Asterisk. From punishment to prototype. Jonah murmured, reading over her shoulder. Old Atsa sat in the place of honor, 90 years old and still sharp. The water always finds its path, she said in her measured way. You were the water these mountains needed. As evening deepened, former students arrived, Mary Thornton from the mining camps, where she'd prevented a typhoid outbreak, Elizabeth Black Eagle from the reservation, bridging 2 worlds of medicine, Frances Chen, doctor, Chen's daughter, who'd established a clinic in Chinatown despite violent opposition. Each carried the knowledge forward, adapted to their community's needs. Tell the story, Mama, Margaret demanded, climbing into Eliza's lap. About when you first came here. So Eliza told it, the children's favorite, how she'd arrived in shame and fear, how Papa had given her dignity and purpose, how the mountains had taught them both to heal. She didn't mention the harsh details, the cruelties that drove her here. Time enough for those lessons when they were older. "And then what?" Thomas asked, though he knew the answer. "And then we built this place, one patient at a time, one student at a time." Later, after the children slept, Eliza and Jonah walked to the creek Eliza's Run, the maps now called it, after the water she'd hauled during Emma Creek's surgery. The moon reflected off the water, silver and constant. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Abernathy had examined you properly?" Jonah asked. "If the town hadn't condemned you?" "I'd have stayed in the valley, remarried, probably, had children, kept house, never discovered what I could do." She turned to him. "I'd have lived half a life, and I'd have died alone on this mountain, slowly going mad from isolation." They stood together, watching the water that never stopped flowing, never stopped finding its way. From the cabin came the sound of Joseph practicing his violin, another skill Jonah had taught him. From the dormitory, soft voices as students reviewed anatomy by lamplight. "Doctor, read." A young voice called. They turned to find Alice Brennan, their newest student, holding a telegram. "This just came from Helena." Eliza read it by moonlight. The University of Montana was establishing a medical college. They wanted her as founding faculty, to establish their rural medicine program. It would mean traveling to Missoula regularly. She said to Jonah, "Good thing the roads are better now." He smiled. "Besides, Joseph's ready to take over more of the clinic management. Sarah and the others can handle the teaching. Maybe it's time to spread what we've built even further." Eliza thought of the girl who'd arrived here in a rickety wagon, clutching a worn satchel. Sure, her life was over. That girl couldn't have imagined this respect, purpose, family, a legacy that would outlive them all. The next morning brought an emergency, a difficult birth at the Sioux camp. Eliza took Margaret with her, the girl holding the medical bag with serious pride. As they worked together, grandmother, mother, daughter, and Eliza with her student, she saw the future stretching ahead. Margaret already showed the steady hands of a healer. Thomas had Jonah's gift for seeing how things fit together. Joseph would carry on the institute. The baby arrived healthy and strong. Another life added to the hundreds she'd shepherded into the world. As they rode home, Margaret asked, "Mama, why do people say we're lucky?" "What do you mean?" "They say we're lucky you couldn't have babies at first. Otherwise you'd never have come here." Eliza considered this wisdom from her daughter's mouth. Sometimes what seems like punishment is really preparation. We just can't see it at the time. That evening, she found Jonah in his workshop, now expanded to include Joseph's projects and the children's attempts. A new rocking chair sat ready for the latest expectant mother. The publisher wants a second edition of the Herbal Guide. She told him, with a foreword by Dr. Westwood. Your grandmother would be proud. She'd be amazed. An Irish midwife's wisdom, printed in books, taught in universities. He set down his tools, pulling her close. None of it would have happened without that first hard step, you climbing down from that wagon, choosing to stay. Choosing to trust, she corrected. Both of us. Outside, twilight painted the mountains purple and gold. The clinic windows glowed with lamplight as students studied. The bee boxes settled for the night. The creek sang its endless song. In the main cabin, children's voices rose in laughter. Joseph was teaching the young ones a Nez Perce counting song. Sarah had stopped by with her own children, adding to the cheerful chaos. Listen, Jonah said, and she did to the layers of life they'd built, medical knowledge passing between generations, traditional wisdom preserved and honored, lives saved and changed. Children who would grow up believing anything was possible if you served where you were planted. What the valley called punishment, Eliza said softly, taught us how to love and how to heal. Jonah kissed her temple, his beard now more silver than brown. And we're not done yet. No, they weren't done. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new students, new challenges. The medical college position would open more doors. Their children would grow and choose their own paths. The clinic would continue long after they were gone, a testament to what two discarded people could build with determination and love. But tonight, in this moment, with her family gathered and her life's work bearing fruit, Eliza Hart Reed, the barren woman who became a mother, the exile who became essential, the punished who became the healer, was complete. The mountain had received a bitter, broken woman and transformed her into something strong and enduring, like the creek that never stopped flowing, like the bees that always returned to their boxes. She had found her place and purpose. The punishment had become providence. The curse had become calling, and the love that grew from mutual respect had built something that would last for generations. In the end, that was the greatest medicine of all, showing others that no judgment is final, no condemn complete, and that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. Thank you for listening to this story from the Wild West. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what resonated with you and where in the world you're listening from. Let's connect across the miles, just as these mountain communities connected across the harsh frontier.